Heyo folks, this is Ham the Guinness Gamer here, bringing you my next video based on Ashes of Creation. What this one's going to be is a summary of the Freehold discussion that happened on Discord, just a community discussion on the 19th of July. Now, first thing I will say before I get into this is there's nothing confirmed in this Freehold discussion. What it very much is, as I say, is a community discussion for the Ashes of Creation devs to get information from the community. So Vaknar and the other devs did a really good job of not letting anything slip or not confirming anything. So if you're looking for confirmed information about the game, this isn't the video that you'll get it in. I have a couple other videos that are summaries of development updates and official Ashes of Creation information. They have confirmed information in them, but what this is, as I say, is just a summary of the discussion on some interesting ideas that members of the community have. So before I get into the actual information that was discussed, I'd be grateful if you could give me a like and a subscribe, and any comments to make, you know what to do underneath there. But for now, let's get into it. So one of the first things that was actually mentioned by a member of the community was toll booths, and this relates specifically to artisan buildings. And what they suggested, and I think it's actually quite a good idea, that you could put a toll booth into your artisan buildings that would allow you to charge random players to use your freehold processing stations or artisan buildings. Now, I think it's an interesting concept because it'll sort of help alleviate the problem that some people will have about, you know, not getting a freehold and are afraid they're not going to get a freehold, because I think somewhere in the region of about only 10% of players are going to own a freehold. But that being said, I think the way that the devs, the way Ashes of Creation are, they're trying to go about it is that they want to encourage a lot of team play, and that's what the family system is, and that's what the guild system is. And even if you don't own a freehold, you can have a family member or a guild member that owns one, and then you'll still get a lot of the benefits of it. So I don't think they will actually put anything like a toll booth. I don't think they want to allow you to sell your, you know, the usage of your freehold to random players. I think it's designed specifically to integrate, as I say, with the family system and the guild system. And somebody not having access to your freehold, I believe, will push towards the PvP element of the game, and possibly even node sieging element of the game, that if everybody can get access to your freehold, say you have the best process, the best smithing process and building, and you're one of the only ones, or maybe the only one on the server, if you can only give that to your guild members and your family, that's great because you get an advantage, but everybody else will be jealous of that. And if they can't get access to it, you know, in their guild and in their families, that's going to drive a PvP element. That's going to drive them to want to siege your node to take your freehold down if you're one of the main people in the server that way. So I think from Ashes of Creation point of view, that's what they're trying to push, and that's what they're with the scarcity element of freeholds. That is going to tie in completely to the PvP side of the game, and therefore I don't think toll booths or anything, I don't think it will ever be possible for a random person to use a freehold without being in a family or a guild. But that's just my personal opinion on it, you know. But reading between the lines with what has been confirmed with from Stephen and from the Ashes of Creation devs, I think that is the road that they're going to go down with that. One of the questions that Vaknar posed to the members of the discussion was about what other businesses they would like to see in the game. Now, of course, taverns have been announced, and a decent bit of information were given about taverns in the Freehold development update, but there's nothing else that has been categorically confirmed. I mean, we can make assumptions about what businesses will be there, but a few that have been mentioned, and one that was actually a few people very keen on, was churches that presumably provide some kind of buffs for people, and presumably then they would also use something as a resource, maybe use candles as a resource, a way to kind of keep the church processing as such, or keep it functioning. There's also been marketplaces. We're assuming there'll be some elements of marketplaces in it, whether there'll be loads of different types of markets and they only sell very specific goods, or there'll be one or two markets, and one's more generic, like foodstuffs and potions, and then another one's maybe armor, and another one's weapons, or maybe it'll just be one market that sells everything. We don't know, but I would say there's certainly going to be some element of markets in it. Another thing that was touched on quite a bit were NPCs, the different types of NPCs that may be available. Now, the only one, again, that we know about and has been more or less confirmed is NPCs in shops or in taverns selling your goods. But also, I've mentioned this before in one of my other videos, but hiring guards would be an excellent addition to any freehold. Don't know whether you'll be able to or not. That may, going back to what I was talking about earlier with PvP, hiring guards might take away from what the devs are trying to do regarding PvP, and because they're allowing PvP on the freehold, not inside your home on the home blueprint on the freehold, but all the rest of the freehold there will be PvP. I imagine having guards will potentially take away from that element from the devs' point of view, but it would be very nice that if you're going to be sitting there on your farm milking a cow, or picking crops, and you're sort of in resting mode, you're maybe not fully geared up, you're not going out to adventure or ready for fighting, if somebody comes along and is able to attack and kill you at that moment, that'll be very annoying. But also I like the element, because it means you're always going to have to be on high alert just in case. It depends on the footfall near your freehold. There'll be advantages then to building or placing your freehold in a place that has very, very low footfall. So that would be something that would come into it then when you're picking where you actually want to try and get the deed for the freehold to place it. And I think that's an interesting concept. I think if it was me, I think I would leave it. I think I would leave the open PvP and no guards from that point of view, but then maybe have guards in your tavern or something, in your business buildings. That would be good, and then you can potentially expel people from the businesses. But I think Stephen did say that you wouldn't really be able to stop people from walking into the likes of your tavern. So I'm assuming that maybe rules out that possibility. But again, it's interesting. The other NPCs then that were mentioned were, yes, guys behind the shops, and yes, somebody actually mentioned hoping that you could invest in your NPCs, maybe have some kind of upgrade tree for them or an unlock tree, which is interesting. That would give a lot of variability in what you're doing with your freehold if you wanted to be a full business based freehold and attract a whole load of people to come. Maybe you have a tavern to sell some potions, you have a shop to sell food with buffs, and maybe an armor shop or a blacksmith shop or something. If you want to attract loads of people, then being able to invest in the NPCs that are servicing these people would be presumably a way for you to then make more money down the line and make your businesses more profitable. Somebody mentioned that they're actually afraid the businesses maybe wouldn't be able to be as profitable as artisan buildings. So obviously you can use the artisan buildings and create, say you have the blacksmith, you have the master or grandmaster level blacksmith, and you're creating the best weapons, then you can go to the auction and you can sell them and presumably be very, very profitable at that, because that you'll be potentially selling some of the best pieces in the game. How does a business, when you have a limited amount of buildings that you can actually place on your freehold, how is a business ever going to match that level of profitability? And not sure, we obviously need to wait and see what the economy is actually going to be like in game, but possibly being able to invest in your NPCs, increase your profit margins, or increase the amount that they're able to sell in a day, could be a way of increasing the businesses up to the level of profit that you could make from artisan buildings. Also, someone mentioned about possibly being able to get employees, hire employees to send out and scavenge. So again, that could be another type of NPC available. You maybe hire a scavenger, or hire a miner, or hire a woodcutter, and send them out, and then you go away offline and do whatever you want to do, and then come back, and you know, an X amount of hours later, and the goods are maybe sitting there on your freehold waiting on you. You know, the guys went out and come back, and that's something that's very intriguing, and I'd say that's very, very possible that that could exist. Somebody asked about, you know, what's the game maybe going to be like, because it's a very vague question, but for casuals, if there was concepts like that in it, it would help casual players certainly if you're willing to invest the money into it. And you can essentially be harvesting resources without you actually having to be online. Now, of course, that's always going to cost you money, and I'd wonder then, well, how's a casual player going to balance that, because they need to have the money to pay the employee to get them to send out, and if you're casual enough, you're maybe not going to have as much, well, you're definitely not going to have as much money as some other players in the game. Also, I get the feeling with the scarcity element of the freeholds that there's very few casual players. I suppose everybody has a different definition of casual, but there are very few casual players who will own a freehold. I think if you're only talking about 10% of people that are going to own freeholds, you're going to have to work hard for it. You're going to have to work hard to get it, and you're definitely going to have to work hard to keep it. And if you set up your businesses and your artisanship buildings right, I would imagine you will be able to have the income coming from the freehold that will cover the taxes and the service charges for keeping the freehold. But I would imagine you will have to play it a significant amount every week to keep on top of that. So I would imagine freeholds aren't going to be too common for your average casual player. Someone else then mentioned ban options for building owners. There's nothing along that I'm aware of along those lines that has been discussed yet. I know there's going to be the permissions, and they're going to relate to your family and your guildmates, but ban options, no, as I said earlier, Stephen did mention about probably not being able to stop people getting into your tavern, and I'm assuming then that's the case with other business buildings and maybe artisanship buildings as well. So there'd be no ban options that way, but that being said, they can't use anything in those buildings. Well, they can't use anything in your artisanship buildings anyway. Presumably they can interact if you have an NPC in the tavern that sells things. Presumably they can interact with them, but even if it's a player you don't like, and maybe a player that griefed you or killed you or something, I mean, if they're on your freehold and they're going to buy some of your potions off your NPC in your tavern, I mean, it can go two ways, that really. I mean, you're making money from it, you're profiting on it, so there's definitely an advantage there. Also, maybe a player you don't like, are getting a buff, and then maybe they can use that buff to kill you in the future, which is quite ironic. But I can't imagine that will actually happen that often. I mean, if somebody's killed you and it's annoyed you enough that maybe you're starting some kind of feud with them, I'd say it's pretty unlikely they're going to want to go into your freehold and buy a potion and give you their money. You know, if they're as annoyed at you as you are at them, and presumably for it to reach that stage you have to have fought each other a few times. It's not just going to be one kill that's going to get you that annoyed. If that happens, yeah, I can see that happening rarely. I can't imagine it being a big problem. It certainly wouldn't annoy me too much. Talking about crops and livestock next, somebody made a good point of yields. You know, for you to want to spend a certain amount of space or use a certain amount of space on your freehold for crops or livestock, the yields have to be worth it for what you get from it. And what people seem to be looking is a little bit more than just food buffs from growing crops. Or if it's going to only be buffs, they have to be really good buffs that players can't get elsewhere. Maybe somebody mentioned about getting some raw drops, maybe from going, from through the whole process of growing, growing crops or feeding and growing animals. Rare drops, better, like unique buffs, I suppose, would be the thing that people want, but then possibly other benefits from it too that do make it worthwhile. Like you're not just going to want a buff that somebody else can get from a spell or something. It's going to need to be better and more unique than that. Somebody else mentioned about being able to be attacked on the freehold. And as I mentioned earlier, this has been confirmed that there will be PvP on the freehold, not in the house footprint, but on the rest of the freehold. And people are afraid then about being maybe stuck in an animation, and while somebody's attacking you and you're in the middle of milking a cow, and they end up killing you before you've finished milking the cow. I imagine there will be a way to cancel the animation if you see somebody coming at you. I would imagine that would be quite quick. But it will be interesting to see how that relates to the devs have talked before about maybe mini games in certain elements of harvesting or crafting. And if you're in the middle of a mini game, like I think they discussed mini games when they were on the Freehold development update, when they were talking about the lumber mill, if I'm right, and maybe having some kind of mini game there. I mean, if you're on the lumber mill and you're partaking in a mini game of chopping wood, and that's going to take, presumably about 30 seconds or something like that, as opposed to just the 1 or 2 seconds that would normally happen in a game for processing something. If that's going to last that length of time, they're going to have something in place that stops players from being able to be killed while in that mini game, because that would be extremely frustrating. And it can't be that you can just cancel out of the mini game, because I imagine then you run the risk of losing resources or failing the mini game, and maybe if there's some kind of cooldown or something on that, that'll be extremely frustrating. So it'll be interesting to see what the devs come up with there. It could well be, like as I said earlier, that they do try and encourage PvP. They seem to be encouraging PvP, and the politics of the world does seem to revolve around, not completely revolve around, because it's a PvX game, but they definitely want PvP integrated at the very center of it. Could well be that then they'll go down the route of letting that happen, and it's up to you to make sure your freehold's well guarded, whether, as I said earlier, you can have NPC guards, or whether you have buddies with you while you're doing this harvesting, just to watch your back while you're doing it. That could be something, particularly if you have an ongoing feud with other guilds or something, and it's likely that you're going to get attacked. And I think that would tie in then with the politics and the living nature of the server and what's actually happening. I think that's, in my view, that's maybe a road they're likely to go down, and possibly you end up losing resources by, if somebody attacks you while you're mid-processing, but there are ways for you to mitigate the chance of that by playing the game and engaging with other players in the game, or even diplomacy with the guild, or that's attacking you. That it opens up lots of windows for that kind of gameplay. Speaking specifically about the scarcity of freeholds, as I said earlier, about 10% of people maybe will have them. That seems to be a positive element in for the community. At least with the community we're dealing with. Of course, now the people that are watching this, they're people that are willing to be watching a game, following a game in, well before it's being released, and where mostly what I've read and seen, people are happy with that scarcity, because it's a reward. It's a rewarding thing if only 10% of players have it. If everybody has one, then it's gonna be worth less to you. But that being said, we are dealing with a certain population that will be playing the game now, and they're the ones that are really, really invested in the game and will like that kind of thing. What I would hope that won't happen is when the game's launched and millions of people start to play it, presumably, and that maybe haven't been following it for the last number of years, I really hope that the devs won't change their outlook on that because the masses start to cry for it, because my experience of gamers in recent years, some types of gamers, should I say, have they want things given to them without having to work too hard. Let's just put it that way. That's been my experience in a number of games, that there's a decent percentage of the population that want things given to them without having to work too hard for them, and will get really annoyed when they can't get something in a game, or can't experience the aspect of that game, and they don't realize if they just play it a bit harder, or play it themselves a bit more, or spend a bit more time, that they'll not get it, and that they will get it, sorry. And yeah, some people just don't like that. The last thing then that of note that was discussed, which I think is a fairly going to be fairly important for a lot of people, is being able to. We already know there's a lot of customization with placement of the freehold, but being able to replace the freehold if things change down the line, like if your original plan isn't quite working and you end up picking up something else or putting another building in that you didn't think, being able to reshape things and edit where you have things placed, and maybe, you know, edit the shape and the orientation of the whole freehold on the estate, would be a good element to have. Now, whether that ends up costing you resources because you have to from a realistic sense, you maybe have to put more resources into something to get it moved, to move it across, or whether you'll just be able to click and drag and drop it, I'm not sure. But hopefully there will be that element. We know there's the element of customization, but the element of being able to change it further down the road, and maybe even choose different shapes of the freehold as well. Instead of them all, I presume they're not all going to come in a, just a rectangular shape, but maybe they are. I don't know. But with the element of customization that's available there, I would assume not. I would assume maybe it's going to be, X amount of 1 by 1 squares is the size of your freehold, but you can adjust that however you want. That's what I would expect, but that hasn't been confirmed or anything. Somebody else as well was asking, will you be able to paint your buildings, and will you be able to have moving animals around as well? Now, I'm not sure about either of those things. I mean, the painted buildings doesn't really, you have the skins that you can get, so I would imagine maybe you will not be able to paint them, but again, I don't know. But moving animals around, I think that's something they hopefully will implement. Just, if you're raising livestock instead of your 4 sheep or whatever just sitting in a wee penned off area and never moving, it would be pretty nice if they just kind of wandered about your freehold, and then maybe you can herd them back into the pen or something when you want. But again, we'll wait and see whether any of that comes to fruition at all. That's more or less everything that I considered relevant or discussion worthy from this freehold discussion from the 19th of July. If you've liked this video, as I said at the start, give me a subscribe and a like, and if you have any comments to make, throw them down below. I'm looking forward to the next Ashes of Creation live stream, which of course is going to be the alpha showing us Alpha 2 Cleric archetype. And of course I'm going to be doing a summary video of everything that was revealed. But for now, I will let you go do whatever you want to do for the rest of the day, whatever time it is there. Good luck and have fun, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.